The future. 4 astronauts are working aboard a near-Earth space station. One day, they try to avoid a potential collision with space debris. The ship's commander, Vincent, is returning from outer space, while the communications engineer, Justine, attempts to identify an unknown issue preventing the station from turning away from the debris. The captain's assistant, Jonathan, reports that there are 6 minutes left before the impact and suggests considering evacuation. But then Justine announces that she has found the malfunction, and Dr. Andrea requests additional coordinates from Mission Control. After receiving the coordinates, Jonathan activates the engines, and the station obediently shifts away, allowing the debris to pass harmlessly. The crew celebrates the successful conclusion of their 500th day in space. Exactly the same number of days remain until the end of their mission. The scene flashes back to the day of their launch. The president of Quebec addressed her citizens, urging them to take pride in having launched a groundbreaking scientific and psychological project where 4 astronauts would spend 1,000 days aboard a space station. The expedition would be commanded by Vincent Kohler, the second human to have set foot on Mars. During a severe global crisis marked by resource shortages, many scientists turned their eyes to the stars. Quebec, one of the few water-exporting countries, drew dissatisfaction from others. This spurred the decision to search for water in space. One scientist collaborated with a private American firm and directed his attention to Jupiter's moon, Europa. Beneath its thick ice crust, water, and possibly life, could exist. A space probe was sent there, paving the way for a future manned mission. However, 1,000 days is no short duration. To prepare the crew for such a long journey, Quebec initiated a 3-year orbital station training program for candidates. The astronauts had become acquainted long before the mission. They worked together, spent time socially, introduced their families, and formed strong bonds. Jonathan's task as an engineer is to receive and process signals from the probe. He is inspired by the idea that his work could change the entire world. Justine is responsible for all the station's electronics. Andrea coordinates all scientific experiments and maintains communication with Mission Control. She also monitors the crew's physical and mental health. As for Vincent, the captain, he is responsible for preparing for the mission to Europa, fully aware of its complexity and the responsibility it carries. He hopes to become the first human to set foot on Jupiter's moon. The crew is well prepared and capable of solving any technical issues. The 900th day of the mission arrives. Jonathan is resting, playing pieces by his favorite classical composers on the piano, and remembering how he visited his mother's grave before departure. Suddenly, a signal from the probe sounds, and he rushes to his workstation, calling the others shortly after. Fresh water has been discovered on Europa. Time passes, and this news spreads across Earth. The discovery of unlimited fresh water reserves is the greatest achievement made by Quebec's probe. Previously, it was believed that the water on Jupiter was salty, making this revelation groundbreaking. The president awards all those involved with medals of honor. While Earth rejoices, the astronauts open a bottle of champagne that Andrea smuggled aboard. Jonathan teases his colleague, to which she responds with jokes. Justine asks Vincent to share his experience on Mars. Vincent recalls the unique journey, but admits that the greatest shock was returning to Earth. Seeing loved ones, walking through his hometown, which somehow felt different. It's an experience they will all share someday. Later, the crew gathers in the control room to look at Jupiter, dreaming of the day they will reach it. Suddenly, a signal warns of an approaching solar storm, a massive burst of radioactive electromagnetic activity. Although the storm poses a danger to the station, the astronauts are completely isolated in their cabins. On this particular day, however, Jonathan and Justine choose to spend their isolation together. Andrea reads letters from her beloved and wipes away tears when the signal for another protocol sounds. Meeting Vincent in the corridor, she realizes the others are delayed. She leaves for the lab while the commander notices Justine exiting Jonathan's cabin and understands what has occurred. Vincent reprimands the engineer, citing this as a violation of flight protocol. In response, Jonathan reminds him that just the day before, the entire crew, led by the commander himself, drank alcohol, something completely unacceptable aboard the station. At that moment, they are interrupted by a distressed Andrea. The astronauts hurry to the kitchen, where the monitor shows Montreal engulfed in explosions. The news anchor reports that blasts occurred in the subway early in the morning when it was crowded with students and workers, resulting in hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. The president promises to find and punish those responsible for this monstrous crime and urges compassion for the families of the victims. Later, the crew receives word that their families are safe, except for Vincent. His son is severely injured and currently in a clinic. Rumors circulate that the attack occurred because of their discovery, and communication with the crew has been limited. However, the astronauts cannot abandon what they started, as it is humanity's last hope. Vincent tells the others that after 1,000 days, another crew is supposed to replace them. However, tragedy has struck. His colleague and backup, Xavier, has died. Upon hearing this, Andrea runs out of the crew's common room. She cries alone in her cabin, recalling how thrilled she was to join the project, with Xavier supporting her every step of the way. Sometime later, Vincent calls his son. The boy, with injuries to his hands, worries about whether he will ever play basketball again. Vincent reassures him, reminding him that he is his son and will recover. Meanwhile, Jonathan teaches Justine to play the piano, noting that she is improving. Suddenly, all communication is lost, and Justine goes to check the systems. At that moment, Jonathan calls the crew to the observation window, where they watch in horror as explosions bloom across the entire planet. They try to contact Mission Control, but there is no response. Vincent orders messages to be sent across all frequencies, but no one replies. Justine notes that nuclear explosions have occurred in all major cities, including Montreal. At that moment, the German space station responds, but they know nothing either and have also lost all communication. Vincent orders radio silence, as it is clear this is a war. Jonathan suggests evacuation, but Vincent asks, "Where to?" and reminds them of their priority, to follow the orders of Mission Control. Andrea reminds him of their families, but the astronauts are powerless to help them. 6 days pass. The astronauts gaze at the dark Earth, where not a single light burns, remembering their loved ones. Vincent occasionally tries to reach anyone on Earth, but it is futile. He asks Andrea to assess their psychological state, but she refuses, as she is just as on edge as the others. Instead, she offers to listen to him. Vincent admits that after his Mars mission, he felt resentful because he was the second to set foot there. Now, when he had the chance to be first, everything has collapsed. Worse still, he may have lost his son, which frightens him far more. He confesses that he no longer knows why he wanted to become an astronaut. This feeling begins to overwhelm the rest of the crew. They question why they strove to reach the stars when their loved ones and all of humanity may have perished. They search for a reason to continue their mission. The 1,000th day arrives. Today, they were supposed to return home to prepare for the Europa mission. Suddenly, an alarm blares on the station, and the AI announces that the emergency escape capsule will be ready for launch in 2 minutes. Everyone rushes to it, only to discover Vincent inside, preparing to abandon the station. Jonathan opens the door and drags the captain out while Andrea seals the hatch, but it is too late to stop the launch, and the capsule detaches, leaving the crew stranded without the option of evacuation. Vincent behaves irrationally, forcing Andrea to administer a sedative. The remaining 3 are left in despair, unsure of what to do next. Following protocol, Andrea declares Vincent unfit for command and appoints herself as the new leader. She reflects on Xavier's death, remembering the moment he proposed to her. She recalls her decision to join the orbital mission and his promise to wait for her. Meanwhile, Justine approaches Jonathan, but he is in no mood for affection and asks her to leave. Later, Vincent explains that he had a nervous breakdown and doesn't even remember getting into the capsule. He admits he just wanted to see his son. Jonathan accuses him of selfishness and cowardice. A heated argument ensues, but Andrea intervenes. They cannot return to Earth, nor can they expect rescue. Andrea calculates their remaining supplies, concluding that if they ration carefully, they can survive for another 25 days. During that time, they must come up with a solution. Now Justine begins to panic, questioning what they would even do if they returned to Earth. There is nothing left. She recalls a friend who disapproved of her decision to join the mission. Back then, she was confident that she wanted to go. One day, the woman exits into open space. Jonathan watches Justine's figure disappear into the void for a long time, while Andrea tries to console him. When Vincent attempts to express sympathy, Jonathan strikes him. An hour passes. Suddenly, a signal comes from the Russian orbital station. The sole surviving cosmonaut requests help and prepares to dock his rescue capsule with their ship. When the cosmonaut arrives, Andrea immediately notices he is emaciated and suffering from radiation exposure. They realize they likely cannot save him. Vincent points out that the Russian capsule is built for 3 people, but now there are 4 of them. With oxygen running out, staying on the station is not an option. Jonathan suggests waiting for the cosmonaut's death and then using his capsule to return to Earth. Andrea refuses to make such a decision, especially as the cosmonaut begins to recover. He explains that his station's reflectors failed during the solar storm, killing the rest of his crew. Jonathan calculates the possibility of returning all 4 of them in the Soyuz capsule but concludes it's impossible. He reflects on Justine and reproaches himself for his coldness toward her. The cosmonaut admits he knows he is terminally ill and won't survive. He reveals that the greatest war in human history has taken place on Earth, sparked by their discovery. Vincent is stunned. Could this truly have been a war over water? The cosmonaut laughs, calling them naive, and explains that water was merely a pretext. Jonathan examines the data from Europa more closely. The crew notices something they had dismissed before: a massive, unknown object resembling an alien spacecraft on Europa's surface. Confused, they question why this discovery was hidden from them, while the Russians clearly knew. On Earth, the conflict was framed as a war over water, but in reality, Quebec concealed the existence of extraterrestrial technology. Vincent insists humanity must learn the truth. This ship could transform their understanding of the universe. He wants to know who built it and where they came from. Later, the cosmonaut thanks Andrea for her care, though he knows he has no chance of survival. Andrea cannot predict how much time he has left, even as Vincent pushes for an immediate launch. Jonathan reflects on his father's farewell letter, which he had avoided reading out of guilt. Meanwhile, Andrea discovers the cosmonaut has disappeared from the medical bay. She finds him near the evacuation section, where he realizes their capsule is missing. Moments later, Vincent and Jonathan hear Andrea scream. The cosmonaut, having discovered their plan, takes Andrea hostage and demands they open the doors so he can return to his capsule. Despite the crew's protests, Andrea gives him the code, but reminds him of those who might still be alive on Earth. Moved, the cosmonaut abandons his plan. The crew discusses their options. The cosmonaut suggests using the Soyuz capsule, but it is too old to land without assistance from Earth. Sensing his hesitation, Andrea reassures him that he will return home. Vincent volunteers to stay behind, blaming himself for the loss of their capsule. On the 1026th day, the crew prepares to depart. Vincent writes a letter to his son, asking Jonathan to find him if he is still alive. Jonathan promises he will. As they say their goodbyes, Jonathan announces that he will stay behind. He plans to broadcast the truth about the Europa discovery to all channels, ensuring humanity learns what they found. He asks Vincent to deliver his father's letter. Andrea promises to send help as soon as possible. The three astronauts suit up and leave in the capsule. Alone on the station, Jonathan begins transmitting the truth, mentally bidding farewell to his father, who, as it turns out, never blamed him and was always proud of his son, the astronaut. There is no hard science fiction in this film. The hopeful hint of alien civilization is unfortunately not developed further. Instead, the film represents yet another exploration of the popular cinematic question: how would astronauts behave in extreme conditions? The conclusions are far from optimistic,